Well, this is going to be an interesting evening for me to talk about the roots of justice. I've never done this lecture before, so I'm going to be thinking out loud with you and learning from hearing myself talk. I'm very curious what I'm going to say. But the very first thing, and I've been thinking and looking at this topic for a long time, it means a lot to me. The whole idea of the roots of justice are in the body. I like that. I really like. Not only is it a good title, but it really says something about the topic of justice. Can you hear what it says? It says justice is not an arbitrary cultural artifact. It's not something that is imposed from the outside, but justice is something that's born in the body. And that's a good thing to think of these days, because we're in the midst of a very unjust period in life. We're seeing injustice everywhere. We're seeing murders and torture, and I think it's heartbreaking for everybody here. Don't you read the newspaper, and what happens to you when you read it? It moves you. I see all of your heads going, and you wonder, where is justice in this now? What went wrong? And all of us are mobilized to do something about it. If justice wasn't in the body, and it was only arbitrary, then we wouldn't have so much hope, because we have to have some reason of hope. But if it's in the body, that means it's universal. It's even in the people who, in the name of justice, are killing so many people. You know? So there has to be some kind of hope that there'll be some answer. Because if we can't think of an earthly answer, then we're going to imagine that justice is not in the body, it's in a bodiless state, and only to be found when we're dead in heaven. Isn't that an awful thought? Isn't that an awful thought? My God. That means we have... Well, you all know the implication of that. When you look at the world and you say, well, where the heck is God if God is allowing this? Then if there's no God, it's horrible. Or it's horrible here on earth in our body. Woof, our body. There's no justice in life. The only justice is in death. And then everything is perfectly right. And so we have to wait to die, and then we're going to get justice. Hallelujah. You know? So I like the idea that justice is in the body. Not only do I like it, I absolutely believe it. And the roots of it are everywhere, in everything alive. So it isn't just in people, it's everywhere. And justice, if you look at the base of it, has to do with making things fit. Because when you talk about justice, you're talking about fittedness. And I look at Professor Kritz because he knows so much about that. And I learned a lot from him the last time I was here and spoke. And I'm going to refer to what I learned from you. This whole thing of fittedness. And that's what everything alive is about, and it has to do with fittedness. Do you know what I mean by fittedness? That things fit together and are just right. And that's what life is always doing. And the very first justice of fittedness is in the very beginning of life, with bacteria, let's say, right? I mean, where the heck is justice with bacteria? That's kind of nuts, isn't it? Yeah. Bacteria, justice. But there's a fittedness that starts right from the beginning of life. What is bacteria? It has sensory organs of some kind, and it's taking in information, and then it does something that will allow its life to continue. That's a sensory motor reality. Think of sensory motor. That's what all life is about. Sensory means you get information in, and then you have an innate, biological, instinctive action that responds to what's in and why, so that life will continue. So the whole point of life, of justice, is to make life continue, not to make life end. So justice is there really from the beginning of living stuff. And we have it in a more and more complex way. The kind of justice that humans have is more complex, but it's still based on sensory motor information. By that, all of us, we see the world and we immediately do something to react to the world. And why? Why do we react to the world at all? Answer. We react to the world in order to keep alive, right? So we need to do something fitted to what comes in. And why do we want to be alive anyway? You don't know? We want to be alive because that's why we were born. We are created without our asking for it. And we have stuff right in our sperm and the egg that makes us. And it has a great impulse. That stuff is going to push us to live, okay? I like to call that evolutionary or genetic memory, okay? We are born with no personal memory whatsoever, but we're born with this genetic memory. And what is genetic memory? The collection and database of everything that has successfully lived from the beginning of time. That's genetic memory. And by gosh, is it hungry to live? And you are the owner of that hunger. Okay? Do you follow that? Yeah, say yes. That fits. That fits. It fits, even though it just fittedness. I need the yes. But so I just want you to understand that we are in a weird place being human beings, you know, because we didn't choose to be alive and we don't choose to die, but by God, we're sitting in an instrument that's going to do just that. And we have to say, this is me, but it is running us, you know, that it thing is wanting to be alive. So inside of us is this immense push to survive, the survival of the self. So that means that everything I see, I'm going to evaluate it. I have selective attention. I'm going to evaluate it. Is that going to be good for me or bad for me? But I'm not going to evaluate it with thoughts. I'm going to evaluate it instantaneously with a body reaction. That's sensory motor, just like the bacteria. It takes in information, but we have selective attention. We're only going to see those things that are going to lead to more life. I was wondering what was up there. Some people, are you thinking or, yeah, okay. I'm provoking thought, okay. I thought something, I was looking up there, thinking, okay. I always check people's gazes and wonder what's making them look at that. So we always, I call that see-do. That the moment we see, we're going to do something about what we see before we even think about it. And what we do about it is going to support the survival of the self. Do you follow that? Okay, yes. Okay, so that means that we have to be fitting. And there's the beginning of fittedness. Just fittedness in order to go on living. And that happens before we think. That happens before we think. That means our body is going to respond to all sorts of sensory input with information. And over time, we're going to not only see, we're going to remember what we saw before that was good. And we don't only do, we're going to remember what we did before that was good. That means the moment we see, we're remembering, and the moment we do, we're remembering. That says that every instant of seeing is a moment of remembering. Otherwise, we couldn't be effective past the first day of our life. Do you follow that? Yes. Okay. Okay. So that means now, when we see, we're going to see with our real eye, but we're also remembering, and we remember with our mind's eye. Okay? The mind's eye is simply, in other words, for the database of learning that we have stored that's going to help us live better. Okay? That's the whole point of experience and learning and memory. And we're going to do. And when I do, I'm going to have a part of my brain that is going to record all the neurological coordinations of what was right or wrong. It's like a baby. You know, it's learning, it's trying to get the bottle. Whoops, it misses, and then it learns. Oh, oof, wait a minute. And then finally it gets it right. And then the next time it gets it a little bit better, and the next time, it gets it perfectly, you know. So, and that's a matter of the mind's body is remembering, and then the real body has more coordination and information. I'm telling you about the mind's body and the mind's eye because that's going to be very important on the justice topic as I go along. Okay? So that's see, do. The moment we see, we have a do, and we have remembered seeing and remembered doing. And the point of that see-do is to keep us continually alive. And what is the other point? For what is the other genetic push? I'm asking, but I'm going to tell you anyway. The first genetic push is survival of the self, right? I'm going to stay alive. I'm going to stay alive. I'm dying. Is that the end of life? No, it better not be. Because as I grow up, I better get to be mature enough to have a partner so that there can be more life. Okay? So the other thing we have inside of us is the survival of the species. And we are very invested in the survival of the species. We don't know we're invested in the survival of the species. We just know we're hot-blooded sexual people, you know? But the whole point of that hot blood is the survival of the species. Right? Yeah, that's the whole idea of it. And that's the reason we have all this. Yeah, now they're looking at each other with love and everything. That's so nice. Okay. But that's the whole point. So every time we see, we're going to see what keeps me alive. And then as I keep growing, I'm going to think, there's going to be life beyond me because I'm going to die. That means we have embedded in us interest in what's going to happen after we're gone on earth. Okay? And there's a beginning of justice too, because we're going to start thinking about those people. We care about them. We want them to have a good life. And in order to have those who live beyond us a good life, there has to be justice. There has to be fairness. So in the whole idea of procreation, at least for humans, is the realization of death, consciousness that there's going to be death, and the consciousness that there's going to be life beyond us. Without that, I don't think there could really be justice. So with the whole sense of justice, there's awareness not only of my mortality, but the need for life to go on beyond us. So, I've talked to you about see, do. There's a sensory motor. It's got a connectedness to it. And I'm talking about survival of the self, survival of the species. And let's look at a couple of more fundamental points. That's, we could call it, if I'm going to survive, that means one fundamental push is to work. So now we'll look at the fundamental pushes of life, to work. And when I'm out there doing something, in a way, I'm working, okay? But that work means survival of the self. In order for there to be survival of the species, the next thing is love. So I'm looking at the fundamental drives of life. One is to work, the other is to love, and the third one I'm beginning to see. Freud already spoke about work and love, but I think the third one is to do justice, and that takes consciousness. That takes consciousness, because without consciousness, you're not going to realize that you die, and you're not going to be so concerned of what comes after you. Okay. Let me now jump ahead, and I'll come back to Professor Kritz. The whole push, and here's where justice is, to make things whole, to make things fit, to make things complete. And there's an innate gestalt to do that. And it's in the whole idea of healing. If I get a cut, it heals, because it's an inner thing to make things whole again. Okay, I don't have to do anything about it. Healing means making whole. That means we have a sense of what wholeness is, and we're compelled to keep wholeness going on. Okay? And you remember I spoke about see, do? I'm going to give you something to see and see what it makes you feel like doing. Okay? Watch this. Didn't you feel the discomfort of that? Isn't that awful? If I stay here, you go, and somebody will jump from the audience and put your hands together. Right? So, yeah, I didn't complete. So whenever there's an incompletion, there's a frustration. Okay? Do you see it? And when there's a completion, there's relief. So we're always rewarded when we make completions, and we're compelled to do the completions. Okay? Okay. Now I'm going to go for some complicated things here. Underneath all that I've spoken about, the need to make things whole, see, do, mind's eye, mind's body, work, love, do justice, there are two engines that are running all of that stuff. Two engines. And you know what they are? It's what we say God does. We say, God giveth, God taketh away. But we are the ones who have those engines, and they're so powerful that we project it on God. What does God giveth mean? Creation. What is creation? Sexuality. What does taketh away mean? Ending death. And underneath that is aggression. Okay? So the two powerful forces that are running everything that I spoke about is the capacity to create sexuality and the capacity to destroy, aggression and murder. And we're all, every one of us in this room has that capacity to kill or create, and any moment it might break loose. That stuff. And it does break loose. We're seeing it all over the world. Killing, and they're not creating, but they're raping. They're using sexuality as a tool, as a raping. That's justice gone wild. And justice does go wild if we don't know how to take those two nuclear forces, blend them together, and modulate them. And then it becomes tenderness and compassion and love and work. But if they break loose, all hell breaks loose. And what makes them break loose? Okay? They break loose from three different classes of events. The first class of events I want to talk about are the kinds of things that have to happen as we mature. As we mature, in order to get us to be generative, we need to have our basic needs met. And among our basic fundamental needs are the need to have a place in the world, the need to be fed, the need to be supported, the need to be protected, and the need to be limited. And limits are, and this is what you all do with your children, because they could get, if they were really big and they did what they felt, they'd kill you or screw you every day of the week, you know. They would do it. Boom, 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 you know. Children have that energy. And we give them a limit, and then they know how to handle that stuff. So it's very important in the maturational phase to have that stuff held together. Otherwise, it breaks loose. I'll get to why that's so important as well. The other kind of event is if we've had trauma. Okay? I'm talking now here deficits, a history of deficits. Then there's a history of trauma. And when trauma comes in, it violates the sanctity of the self and then takes control of the self. And the amygdala, in order to survive, triggers off freeze, fight, flee, and there's another one, appease. So if we have gotten traumatized, it expands exponentially the ability to kill, because that's what we're going to do. We have to fight like crazy in order to live, or to open up and surrender sexually in order not to be killed. That's the Stockholm syndrome. Do you, all of you know that? That's what happens. The hostages fall in love with the terrorists, not because they're insane, because that's an instinctive reaction to stay alive. So if people have had a poor history where they haven't had enough of their needs met and they haven't had limits, this stuff is going to be loose, okay? Or if they've been traumatized, this stuff is going to be loose. Now here comes some of the theory that's going to have to do with justice. Because we have that sense of justice, a very odd thing happens. And it has to do with hearing stories, okay? Here's what I'm getting at here. We have a need to make things whole and to make things complete. And you remember how frustrated you got here when I didn't make it whole, and you felt the compulsion to do it. Oh, before I go into that, let me tell you a funny story. Yeah, because it's getting so serious. Now, I got to tell you a funny story. How automatically people really want to help. And I saw that 2 days ago when I was in a big rush, very late at night, and I barely missed my train, and I'm carrying this stupid luggage on wheels, and I'm struggling up the stairs like this, and I looked like I needed help. And all at once my luggage got light, and I could walk up with my luggage. And I looked back, and this nice gray-haired old lady took the other end of my luggage and put that there. She didn't ask me what my religion was. She didn't ask me what my color was. She just did it. That has to do with helping and making. She saw an incompletion, and she had to do something. We all have that. Now, she actually did it. Some people might have said, that poor guy really needs somebody to lift it up. You know, they may have seen it in their mind. And why would somebody know that? Mirror neurons. You know what mirror neurons, you all should know. You don't know what mirror neurons are. Do you know what mirror neurons are? Yeah, it's a neurological fact that they tested it out, that we have in our brain, and monkeys have it also in their brain, the capacity to do in their mind's body what they see somebody else doing, okay? So if I do this and I scratch here, they put monkeys in a scanning machine, and they saw the monkeys' arm motor neurons were firing exactly like that. You know, you've heard monkey see, monkey do, you know? That's actually what's happening. So every time people see something, they see it in their own mind, as if their body is doing it. That's the beginning of theory of mind, okay? That's the beginning of theory of mind. Because not all animals can do that. That means when the monkey sees somebody else do it, they feel in their own body what the interior feels like to the other person. That's called the theory of mind. You know the other person has an interior, and you could feel their interior because you're being like them in your brain, okay? So everybody who saw me struggling was also struggling with me in their mind, okay? Everybody, automatically. And some people in their mind's body lifted it up for me, but their real body didn't do a thing, you know? Because we could do it in our mind's body. And everybody's doing justice in their mind's body. That's what I want to say. When you read the newspapers, guess what? You're healing all the wounds. If you read about the African children who are starving, a piece of your mind's body is over there in Africa feeding them. So, because you feel what they're feeling, that's empathy, but then you need to complete it. We all need to complete the action. And it's interesting. because everybody wants to help. Another thing happened in Osnabrück. I was on the train station. This is some, how do you like that? There it is. There it is. I didn't rehearse this. It's not a setup. This just happened. Okay, that happens all the time. I was on the platform with Melanie, and my rolling cart fell to pieces. And there the train is about to come, and I'm trying to put the rolling cart back together, and I'm like this, and all it wants to see a hand. And it's got a safety pin in it. Some woman wanted to help, but she brought me a safety pin. Maybe I could pin it together, you know. And that's there all the time. And I want to give you another story. We had a dog, and we had some property, a house, and a big yard, and we bought a wheelbarrow. You know what a wheelbarrow is? It's a thing you use. It's what you use in the garden to carry things. But it was in a carton in a box, and we had to assemble it. Yeah, it was all in pieces. Yeah, it was all in pieces. We took the box out, and we had a very smart German Shepherd dog. Okay. Very smart dog, and we were. And he wanted help. He wished he had arms. You know, he was trying to do stuff with it, and we said, "Go! You know, stop it." You know, so it ran away, and we put the thing together, and he comes back. He found a rusty wheel, and he brings it. He dropped. I mean, the animals have that too. It's to help. They want to help. So, but some people help with doing, but we all help with our mind's body. Now I want to talk to you about your mind's body. Okay. First, we have a sense of what is complete and natural and just in terms of a family system, okay? It's inbuilt. Why is it? I don't know why it's in, but I think we're made of a sperm and an egg. Oh, then I had a father. But he was made of a sperm and an egg, so he must have had a mother and a father. That's grandmothers, grandfathers. Ooh, my mother had sperm, ooh, grandmother, grandfather. My father had brothers, aunts, uncles, cousins. So we know there should be a full complement. We know instinctively what a full family network should be. Can you get a picture of that? We really know, and when it's right, yeah. It's just right. It feels good. But if we hear stories, now think of what a story does. If I tell you Little Red Riding Hood, what happens in your mind? You see Little Red Riding Hood, right? Did you see it? Yeah. Had a little red hat. You see it, right? Okay. So if you hear a story, you're going to see it in your mind's eye. But your mind's body is also going to react, okay? So if we hear stories where there's some kind of incompletion, our mind's body wants to do something about it, okay? And is compelled to do something about it. In the same way that, because we have a sense of a family network like a web. It's as if we know what a just, right family network should be, and we all carry it around. Not only do we have that, but we have in ourselves what I call stem cells. Not stem cells. You know what a stem cell is. You don't? A stem cell is a cell with the embryo that can be any other kind of cell. Do you follow? Do you know that? Could you? Yeah. Yeah. But now I'm talking about stem self. We have parts of ourself that could be any kind of role. Because when I grow up, I can be a brother or a sister, I can be a husband or a wife, I can be a mother or a father, a grandmother or grandfather, and I've got in myself every single role that could be. And when I grow up and that role gets awakened, I'll be that. Okay? Okay. Now, think of a spider. You saw me do that. I did this in a lecture in Munich. I like to do this. Think of a spider. And the spider makes a web. It sees a perfect web, complete, a whole gestalt. The wind comes, and it breaks the web. It cannot stand it. It's a broken thing. So it goes, and it sews it back up with pieces of itself. And that's what we do when we hear stories of a broken family network, okay? So if you're a child and you hear that your great-grandmother, who you never saw, was an orphan because her father was killed in some war, and you're going to see in your mind, you never saw your great-grandmother, but you heard the story. And as you hear the story, you're seeing your great-grandmother, she's a little girl, and her father dies. There's the mirror neurons. You feel the way she feels, but you also know what she's missing, okay? So what do? If we have empathy, and we all do, and if we have compassion, and we all do, we take a little piece of ourselves, and we become our great-grandmother's father who doesn't die. And we don't know that. Our mind's body is running around the world being a messiah. Okay? It's true. We're all waiting for the messiah. That's nonsense. Messiah. Everywhere and everywhere. Every one of us has the compulsion to complete and do justice. Okay? We all have it. We can't help it. But we don't know it's happening. Our mind's body is running around the universe, filling every empty hole there is. Okay? Just think of the stories you know in your own history. Think of what makes you cry about some kind of event in your cultural history, in your personal history, in your religious history. And if you think of that, all the injustices, the moment you see the injustice, a piece of you, without you knowing it, is going to fly through time and space and fill that spot. I don't know if you know that, but you should, because it's happening to you all the time. That's our sense of justice, and it's in our body, and we all want to heal the universe. Now here comes a funny piece of business, okay? The dark side of doing justice when that is blind, when that kind of justice is blind. And let me put it this way. There are three basic connections in life. The first connection is the connection to myself. I really have to know who I am and how I feel. So I'm not just a head, I'm connected to my limbic system. And in order to live, I need connection with the other, because all my needs are going to be met by the other, and then I'm going to marry another, and then there's going to be children. The third basic connection is the connection to God. You may have thought that I wasn't religious, but I am. But I'm not religious in any traditional sense. And I have to tell you a funny story here. Jesus. When we were, years and years ago, when we lived in this little town, it had a university, a college in it, that was run by Christian fundamentalists. Okay? And you know what a Christian fundamentalist, they are absolutely believing they have the truth right there. And we had babysitter, and one of them, the babysitters, was a student, and her father was a minister in the Christian fundamentalists. And she knew I was Jewish, and she knew my wife, who was Christian but not practicing, that in her mind, you know. And then she said to us one day, "You're so moral for pagans," she said. Do you know what that? She thought morality was a religious topic and not a human topic. It only came from a religion. So again, she thought justice was not universal, but it came from a religion. Okay, but I just want to tell you, I'm not a pagan. Okay, and so the third basic connection is the connection to God. We all need to have a sense. I don't know how you define God, but we all need to have a sense that there's some ultimate meaning and order in the universe. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to live. And I do believe there is some ultimate order, but I don't look in terms of a personal God who's doing things directly for me. And my definition of God is all that is, okay? And my definition of me or you is all that I am and all that you are. So we're not all that is. But if we are all that is, that means there is no other. God needs no other, because God is all there is. So here's the odd part, why I'm bringing this up. If we fill a hole in a row, we begin to think we're the only one on earth to do it. And we begin to think we are all that is. And we stop being just a human, and we come up to some kind of God-like place without knowing it. And when we think we're all that is, in that unconscious way, it releases those bonds of aggression and sexuality, and then we get overloaded with energy. So the more holes and rows we fill, the less control we have over those forces, and we have to use all kinds of defenses to hold it down. And if we fill holes and rows when we're too young, let's say if you're 4 years old and you hear these stories, because little children fill holes and rows automatically. Let me tell you a little story about little children. They did some research with little infants who are 18 months old in diapers. And there was a room full of little children, 18 months old, with diapers, and a researcher puts a clothesline across. You know what a clothesline is? Hang close. So she put a clothesline in the room, and the little babies are watching. Yeah. And then she has a basket of clothes, and she puts it, she takes a clothespin, she takes a clothes, and the babies are watching. And she takes, whoops, and it falls down. Guess what happens? All the babies run over to, they want to help, you know. So the thing of filling holes and taking care is right from infancy. And if we take care too soon, if we put out too soon, our ability to receive shrinks. That's a crazy equation, but I've found it to be absolutely true. That if we take care of the other too early, we then shrink and we don't mature. So now I'm talking about mature justice and immature justice. If we do justice too soon, it releases these demonic forces in us, and that some part of us gets terrified of the energy, and every now and then it breaks loose. This is how I explain why certain world leaders are having demonic forces that break loose. I'm assuming somewhere in their history, too early, they filled the holes. They become maybe the husband for their mother or the caretaker for their father, whatever. They filled it too soon. They become then the only. Most people, when they do that, and that energy breaks loose, they have systemic controls. They get depressed and the energy goes down. They dissociate, the energy goes down. Or they say, I'm not evil, the evil is coming after me. Or they attack themselves. Or they kill the ability to be happy. Or they never finish anything. Because finishing something means to finish it off. And they're not going to do that. Okay? But some people who have filled holes and roles and then get into a position of power, then get demonic, and they think they are the only. And we're looking at that in the world right now. Bush, for instance. Sorry, any cameras here? Oops. Because here he becomes the only, and what is he ready for? Regime change. Because he then will take rid of any other leader, because he would be the only one. This is, you look at any dictator, and that's always the case. Everyone who's not me is dead. Okay? So it doesn't become an inclusive justice, it's an exclusive justice. There's, I will keep alive mine, but anything that's not me is going to be dead meat. Okay? So we get inclusive justice if we do justice mature, and if all our needs are met, and we have this stuff well bounded, then we're going to have justice. And too many of our world leaders don't have such a good history. When they get to power, the demonic forces break loose, and you're going to see dead bodies and rape going on. So how important it is to make sure that we have cultures where children are really cared for, where trauma doesn't happen, and people don't have to fill holes and roles too soon. Because if they do, then we're going to see injustice on a planetary level. And that's exactly what we're seeing. Because all those people have history of injustice going back for centuries, and they are all trying to be the healer of it. And they break loose and they kill or have fantasies of endless sex. Okay, so now we're coming somewhat maybe to where the therapy comes in. Because some people come to therapy and they have missing needs, and what we do in this therapy, now I'm talking about therapy, not about justice, but we try to do justice. We create a new history, a new memory, where all the things that they needed to go and be mature are provided. We do justice. We make completions. We make a new memory where all of their historical deficits in their history are healed, and then they can grow and have limits on all of their power. And we've learned how to work with people who've had historical deficits of needs and histories of trauma, but now we know how to work with people who have filled holes and roles and have resistance to having their needs met. Because if we fill holes and roles too soon and we are needing something, we can't take it. And that's the martyr person, the saint, who is giving, 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 but has a miserable life. Okay? They're taking care of the other, but they can't receive. So what we've learned to do with someone who perhaps in their life, this is a little story, I think I told it the last time I was here, about a girl who's 4 years old. This is a make-believe story. A little girl's 4 years old, it's her birthday, but her mother's crying. And she's immediately compassionate. She says, "What's the matter, Mommy?" You know, she sees Mommy crying. And the mother says, "When I was 4 years old," so what's she going to do? She's going to see a movie in her mind of her mother 4 years old. Mother says, "When I was 4," boop, in her mind. Now this is her mind. She's seeing it. "Oh, Mommy, 4 years old." Then she says, "My father," boop, oh, Mommy has a daddy. Then she says, "Died." She sees the ghastly thing. What does she do? This little 4-year-old goes, pulls the possible father. Her mind's body goes there and becomes the mother's father. Do you see that picture? That happens. When you tell your stories to your children about your hardships, they are going to heal it with their mind's body, and they don't know it. But when they do things with their mind's body, their disposition of energy in their real body shifts like crazy. Okay? But the mother doesn't finish the story. She says, "You're such a good little girl." Huh. She says, "You listen to me when I cry." "Yes, Mommy." "But your father," "Oh, Daddy, is such a rat. He laughs at me when I cry and he leaves." Mommy's got no husband. She becomes the mother's husband. Also, she then takes care of the mother. But at that moment, her ability to be mothered shrinks. She's giving out too much. She grows up, she gets to be an executive in a corporation. She's always giving. She never receives any. She can't stand it. She has all this problem, okay? But she's a competent person, except she's got a life is not so good. People who work with executives will know that kind of person. So you say to her, oh, she says, "Oh, I had such a horrible childhood. My mother was always miserable because her father died." So we say, "Why don't we give you an ideal mother?" And she says, "Are you kidding?" She could you see suddenly resistance and all this demonic stuff that's sitting under there comes out at the therapist. It's called negative transference, okay? She could knock you off. And yet that moment before that, she really wanted a mother. So now when people don't take in, I say, "Who did you take care of when you were young?" "My mother, she had such a miserable life. I feel so..." All the compassion for her mother. So we make what we call a movie. We make a movie. I point there because we did that all day today. We make a movie. We say, pick somebody to role play your mother as a little girl. The person cries. She says, that's a terrible life. Poor mother. So we say, why don't we give your mother an ideal father who doesn't die? Somebody role plays ideal, and he says, if I were your ideal father, I wouldn't die when you're 4 years old. Guess what happens to the client? What a relief. The burden of that falls off, and it's as if their mind's body that was there comes back into themselves. You say, what a relief. Wow, if my mother had a father, she would have been a better mother, and I could have been mothered. Bing, she's waiting to be mothered. But before we give her a new mother that she would believe in, we say, well, why don't we do another movie? Your mother is a young woman, we'll give her an ideal husband. We'll make another movie. And he'll say, if I were your ideal husband and you cried, I'd take you in my arms and I'd be kind to you. And she says, oh, my poor mother, she wouldn't need that. The part that was the husband comes back, and then she's in a better position to receive. And we say, how would you like an ideal mother who would have been more mature? And she says, what a good idea. 5 minutes ago, she would have killed me for that thought. And then she could get an ideal mother and get her needs met. And then her energy is not so diabolic and not so suppressed, and she has more energy and time for herself. That's the kind of work we do. So that's a little bit about justice and how we are all endlessly trying to make justice in the world, how important it is for each of us to make a movie where the justice that we tried to do when we were too little is done by the right person, so that we can get a more mature justice and grow up and get our needs met and have an exclusive justice, an inclusive justice that includes others who are not me, who are not like me, so the whole planet can survive, not just simply me and mine, but all diversity. And I think this is beginning to happen in the world. People who are ecologically conscious and want to keep the planet alive. They want to do that kind of justice. And we need more and more of that. But we need, in order for people to reach that point and not have the kind of justice that says, I'm going to bring justice in the world where everybody who doesn't think like me is dead. We have to get the kind of justice where everybody has their right to live, and that we have equality and wholeness of the whole planet. That's as far as I want to go with this, the justice part. We'll take a break here, and then if you like, I can do a demonstration and show you how this actually looks. So.